Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for coming to our Pride Month Film and TV panel. We are so excited to have you. Before we get started, I just want to say a few things about the Los Angeles Public Library. I am Emily. I am the adult librarian at the Studio City branch, and I want to encourage everybody in Los Angeles to get your Los Angeles Public Library card. You can have instant access to all our digital resources, movies, music, books, audiobooks, and more. And you can just go to our website, lapl.org, to sign up. It is also right now the Summer Reading Challenge, and that is for all ages. So you can go to lapl.org/summer to sign up and have a good time doing that. On that page, you'll find out more about the Teens of LA Film Festival. So teens from 11 to 18 are invited to submit short films to this film festival, and there are resources that will help the teens. The deadline is July 6th. They're professional judges, so I hope some teens will consider participating. And with that, I want to turn things over to our moderator. We have a great panel here for you tonight. Our moderator is the director of current series at Freeform, Rod Carrillo-Lundgren, and I'd like to turn things over to you. Rod, thank you so much for being here and doing this for us.
Thanks, Emily. I'm so excited to be here. As she said, I am director of current series over Freeform, and I'm fortunate to be working on such shows as Good Trouble and Everything's Gonna Be Okay. Before Freeform, I worked at Sofia Vergara's Latin World Entertainment, and before that, NBC International, as well as Universal Cable Productions. So to kick off tonight's panel, I'd actually love for each panelist to tell us a little bit about themselves, your background, your career journey, everything. So let's start with Michael, since you're my first square.
I'm really happy to be here, and it's nice to meet everybody on the panel, those that I haven't met yet already. My name is Michael Reisz. I write both television as well as features. My journey has been a unique one. Most recently, in terms of my writing, I wrote Blumhouse's Truth or Dare for Universal, most recently for features, and I'm currently writing another horror movie. And now I've got a pilot at CBS and a pilot through AMC. We'll see if they actually go. How did I get here? I was born and raised in LA, and very briefly, I did the traditional path of starting off as a lawyer and then quitting to become an actor. And then I was an actor for 10 years. And then I became a writer starting through the Warner Brothers Drama Writers Workshop. And I've been writing and producing and executive producing shows since, I guess, 2003. And I love the power of TV. So it's wonderful to be here.
Awesome. Thanks, Michael. Next up, let's turn it over to Kase.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. Kase Peña here. My journey into film, I've always been an artist since I was very little. Later on, I was never a filmmaker when I was younger, but later on, I living in New York City, I was influenced a lot by Spike Lee and his trajectory. I was very curious about his trajectory, so I kept following him and following the things that he was doing. And then one day I realized that he had gone to film school. When I learned that he had gone to film school at that point, I didn't even know that was possible. So that's when I decided that that's what I was going to pursue. When I went to film school, I was hanging out with a bunch of guys that were older. Like I was a freshman and they were juniors and seniors, and when they left school, they started working in the business. And so before I graduated, they started hiring me on sets. And so I cut my teeth working on sets. I did everything. I interned on set where I was like getting no money. I wasn't getting paid. I was a production assistant. I worked my way up into the camera department. I worked in the camera department for many years and I loved it. But I always knew that I wanted to write and direct. I made films on the side as whenever I could. And I moved to LA 4 years ago. And I see how much being here has helped my career in the 4 years that I've been here. And yeah, that's, I guess, pretty much it.
Awesome, thanks. And next up we have Azia.
Hi, my name's Azia Squire. I'm originally from Atlanta. I was born and raised there. I was always a writer, so I was always creative, but most of my family they're very business and math and science oriented. And so I was sort of the creative black sheep. And that I think made it a little tricky to kind of figure out how to take on that that creative drive, like what that literally looks like. My favorite show is Buffy. I'm obsessed with it. I watch it constantly, especially during that time, and I feel like it taught me how to write, but it never occurred to me to actually take that to write screen. That like, oh, there are writers who go into a room and they create the episodes of this, and this is how the show happens. So I focused on books, and I wrote books and comic books and that sort of thing. And I did that all the way through undergrad. I went to the University of Pittsburgh. I majored in prose, and it was during that time, around, and Shonda Rhimes really was starting to rise. I was watching Shameless. Like it was really just like me being passionate about certain writers and certain shows. It occurred to me, oh, you should write screen. Like that's what you should do. So I sort of gave myself a bit of a crash course in it, and applied to USC on a whim. I got into their writing program, which brought me to LA, and it's been, kind of a straight shot from there. I've been an assistant on different shows, and I've interned at networks and things. Most recently, I've been writing a project called Amari and the Night Brothers for Universal. It's based on a book written by a wonderful writer. His name is B.B. Austin, and that book is coming out in a few months. I'm doing the film on that. I have a script called Sister that's on the blacklist, this current blacklist. And right now I'm writing on a show called First Ladies that Viola Davis is starring in and producing for Showtime. She'll be playing Michelle Obama. So that's been really fun. So those are what I've been juggling.
Awesome, thanks Azia. And next up on the squares here, I have Eric.
Hey everyone, again, thanks for having me too. I'm also, like Michael, native Angelino. I grew up in the glamorous city of Downey, and I basically read comic books and watched TV as a kid. So my parents were very neglectful, and TV was my babysitter. And I used to, and I think probably what set me on the course of working in television was the fact that I would read comic books and they're all in panels. And so I think visual storytelling, I had a keen interest in it early on. So then I wrote short stories, and I eventually went to college at Santa Clara University, majored in English, double minored in theater and dance. I was studied modern dance, wore a unitard 24/7, put on my own plays. That's where I started playwriting. And I really thought that I would just be like a corduroy patch wearing university professor for the rest of my life until I got to grad school at Tisch. And I had a professor basically tell me that I was funny and I was a very needy person. So I was all ears. And he had worked on Seinfeld and SNL. And he said, if you're interested in doing this, I think you should do it. And I was like, you're right, I should totally do this. And I moved to LA a year after grad school, was an assistant, worked for a manager for a few years, and kind of worked my way up, worked for some showrunners, and continued to do theater out here. I run a theater company called Chalk Rep. We do site-specific and immersive theater. That's really fun. And I work with new playwrights on new plays. And my break in television was on a show called Guidance that's on Hulu. It's a teen kind of murder mystery melodrama. I was on that show for a couple of years, and my most recent project was AJ and the Queen for Netflix with RuPaul, and that was a lot of fun. And now I'm working on a feature that takes place in Flint, and I'm also working on a pitch that takes place in kind of the world of Broadway in like the late 80s.
Awesome, thanks, Eric. And next up, we have Henry.
Hold on. There it is. Hi. My journey is a really unique one, but as far as what I'm working on now, I just got off Little America, season 2 of Little America, where it was my first staffing gig, and I got an episode, which was very exciting. So I co-wrote that with Stephen Dunn, and it's based on a trans Cuban woman's true story. So look out for that when we're ever allowed to shoot again. I just adapted the book, Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe, which is something that I read very in one day. I fell in love with it. And I wrote to the author and told him that I was the person that needed to make this. I flew out to El Paso, convinced him that that was it. And then I was like, oh shit, what do I do now? I mean, I had just done like my own projects and my own movies, but somehow Outfest has been really supportive to my career. And they linked me with Kira Sedgwick's company and Valerie Stadler at Big Swing. And since then, we're looking for financing right now, and we're almost done with that. So hopefully we'll be shooting that really soon. I'm also currently adapting Gracefully Grayson, which is the first middle grade book of its kind. And it's about a 12-year-old trans girl. So if you haven't read that, I highly recommend it. I mean, I got here I didn't go to film school. It was delusional confidence and not waiting for permission, which is, I think, what I would encourage a lot of young filmmakers interested in pursuing a career in this field, is just doing it and not waiting for anybody to tell you to do it. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here. Awesome. And next up, we have David.
What's up, guys? What an amazing panel. It's just awesome listening to everyone's stories. So I'll give the Cliff Notes version of my story. I'm also a native Los Angelino, grew up in Inglewood for the first 13 years, then moved to Santa Monica. And actually, I moved right around the time of the O.J. Simpson trial. And so that was a very formative experience for me. So it's actually influenced a lot of the things that I write about, race relations and sort of the criminal justice system. But I can divide my career trajectory in sort of two halves. The first was everything before the 2007 strike. So I went to Yale for undergrad, and I thought I was pretty clear that I was a theater kid, loved the arts, and I also loved Spike Lee. So I thought, I'm going to go to film school, become like, Spike Lee meets Fellini. That was my dream. And then when I got to film school, it was sort of the first golden age of television. And it was shows like The West Wing and The Sopranos. And it really sort of opened my eyes into what you could do with television. So I immediately went to USC Film School, focused in production, but took a lot of writing courses, PA'd on some shows, became a writer's assistant for a show called Judging Amy, if anyone remembers that, and then was about to get staffed. And then we had a writer's strike. And it basically threw my trajectory off course for a couple of years. But I ended up teaching, ended up meeting with some people and working at a little company called YouTube for a little while as their news and politics editor during the first Obama election, and moved to San Francisco, thought, maybe I would pursue that path, very cushy 401k, but I knew I had to go back into writing and film. So I moved to San Francisco. I moved back to LA, took a job at a startup to make ends meet, kept writing in the mornings, and eventually reconnected with someone, this guy, Alex Kurtzman, who had gone to my high school, but he was putting together a film, and I became his assistant on that. So I went from cushy executive job at a startup to then becoming a low-level assistant again. But I did that for about a year and a half, and Alex was one of the co-creators of a show called Sleepy Hollow. So when that show went on, I went on that show, and then fortunately since then I've been working pretty steadily. So right now I'm a writer producer on a Showtime series that hasn't been announced, so I can't say what it is. And I've also got a couple of feature things in the works, including a script that I wrote about a young Johnny Cochran and one of his first big cases about police brutality. So so those are the things going on with me, but happy to share more as we go on tonight.
Just a few things going on. My God, thanks so much. Seriously, this panel is amazing, and we still have Taylor and Abdi to get to. Taylor, you are up next on my squares.
Him and Taylor just kind of walked in. I think I'm in the wrong panel. I agree. Everybody here is amazing, and I'm so happy to be a part of this panel. Hello, my name is Taylor Orci. Gosh, I literally wrote things down on a Post-it because I was like, be concise. Nobody wants to hear all of your meandering, and just this, like, the heart of what everybody is saying is making me, wow, just want to make sure that I dig as deep as I can. All right, so I always wanted to write when I was little. Before I knew what I wanted to do, I would copy the dictionary. And I was just like, all the words are in here. Like, I remember when I saw the dictionary was here the whole time. Like, that blew my mind. And I, of course, didn't transcribe the whole dictionary. I got to like aardvark, which is AA. So, you know, it didn't work. It's a hard task. Anyway, so I knew I wanted to tell stories, but I didn't think for me that was supposed to be my path. I always was very much growing up about like I was a real like activist in high school, and was all about like lobbying for like I was the student that was like lobbying Congress to change you know, the gay rights in the LAUSD education code and all of these things. And writing for TV just didn't even cross my mind at that point. So I went to school. I ended up at UCLA for International Development Studies, and I thought I was going to be, and concurrently I was at UCLA. So I was at UCLA for International Development Studies, and then I was at NPR. So I actually would go to NPR at 4 a.m., do it till noon, and then go to my classes. And nobody at NPR knew that I was in college. It was like, now they do because I talk about it, but I would like try to hide how young I was. Anyway, and that was a very good job. It was a very solid job. It was a fulfilling job. I thought that I was going to be get a fellowship for an investigative reporting assignment embedded with the FARC. I didn't know what I really, I thought that's what was going to be my course, except for the one part, which was I was real goofy. And so they put me up for this job as a director for this show called Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me. And I got it. And then I turned it down, and I was like, wait, I don't know what I'm doing. And I just quit all of NPR to work at WNYC in New York, but do comedy there, because I thought with my political background and my activist background, I was going to be a shoo-in, me cocky, I was going to be a shoo-in for The Daily Show or Colbert Report. And at the time there was the writer's strike. So one of the head writers of Colbert was teaching a class that I took, and I basically stalked him. And I was like, how did you do comedy? How did you do it? And he kind of told me what he knew and kind of led me through what he did. And that's when I started to do improv more, do more performing. I was terrified. I had a lot of stage fright, but with comedy, it's a lot about timing. So I worked on it. And then after that, basically, it translated into with my journalism experience with that's how I learned how to video edit, for instance. That's how I learned how to audio edit. That's how I learned to present my voice in a certain way when I reported on pieces. And then combined with the acting, I guess I was like, oh, it's kind of a filmmaker. I didn't realize that yet. I was like, I'm going to make my own videos. And I didn't understand that that's just a filmmaker. And when I started making my own videos in comedy, because I felt like the theater system didn't appropriately accommodate the voice that and the background that I came from. Also native Los Angelino. I'm going to rep Inland Empire here, and also a little bit of West LA and also East LA. So I kind of was a lot of places in my childhood. So I started making little short films or comedy sketches and different things. I didn't know what would stick. I eventually got a viral video, which was called Bitchy Resting Face. And I remember going on the Today Show with $5 in my bank account. And I was like, wow, is this what it means to make it? And the answer is no. That is, it was still incredibly rocky after that, but at least I had a calling card. And so the first staff writing job that I had was at an animation studio called Fox ADHD. And then I got that job, and then I did not get another staffing job for 4 years. So that was very humbling and provided a lot of opportunity for insight. And then yada, 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 now I'm here. My most recent credits, I guess, are I just got off of Vida, where I co-wrote the season premiere with my boss, Tanya Sarracho, and also wrote a song for episode 5, where I also sang and danced and drag, and because I do drag king stuff. And then also I worked on a show called Kipo, which is an animated female friendship forward action adventure from DreamWorks. And that's in its 2nd season right now. I also wrote a song for that, which is for this season, which is real cool, called Heroes on Fire. Currently, I am writing a film for New Line Cinema and developing a project for TV for DreamWorks currently. And just recently, I'm applying for funding for a documentary to see if I can kind of combine all that political and that political and diplomatic knowledge that I know and that I love with entertainment that I learned how to do.
Awesome. Thanks, Taylor. And last but not least, Abdi.
Hey everyone, I'm Abdi Nazemian. I was born in Iran. I moved quite a bit as a kid, and I came to the US when I was 10 years old. And I think that's when I really immersed myself in storytelling, because I just did not fit in to the suburban town I lived in. So all I did was read comic books and watch movies and television, and I always knew that's what I wanted to do. So I moved to LA right out of college and was an assistant. And I also, actually, it's funny, I think it was David who said that you split up your career in terms of pre and post writer's strike. I always thought of mine the same as well. Before the writer's strike, I was in a writer's partnership, and we were very lucky to be writing a lot of studio movies, most of which never got made, but that paid very well. And so I was like, I'm living the dream. I'm writing all these movies for movie stars that no one will ever see because they'll sit on a shelf, but I can go eat wherever I want to. And then the writer's strike happened, and all the jobs dried up, and I had children around the same time. And I was like, oh, this can never work. I have to go get an MBA and become a business person to survive. And I did go get an MBA. And somewhere along the line of like studying spreadsheets and advanced finance, I realized that I wanted to double down on creativity, but that I couldn't go back to kind of writing the kinds of things I was writing before, which were really jobs and like things other people wanted me to write. So I wrote a novel, and I guess it was the first novel to have an Iranian gay man as its lead character. And now I'm writing my 4th novel. I've had 3 published, and I've been in 2 writers' rooms. And then I also started heading up development for a production company called Water's End Development. And we've been involved in a lot of movies, a couple that I'm proudest of are Call Me By Your Name and Little Woods, and Scotty and the Secret History of Hollywood. So yeah, like post-writer's strike, I very much think of my career as like me being in control versus me like waiting for a studio to like tell me what romantic comedy I'm writing. Yeah, I guess that's it. I'll stop there.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for being here tonight. So why don't we start off with something a little bit easier? Henry actually touched on this a little bit, but I want to open this up to everyone. What are some of the films, TV shows, books, everything that have kind of stayed with you over the years and even inspired you to get into writing?
Who wants to go first?
I unmuted myself. How does this work? Can I raise my hand? I think that the first series that really stood out for me that I loved, which is kind of relatively new, is Orange is the New Black. That might be the first series that I got absolutely obsessed with. Because before then, I feel like I was just trying to mush my voice into something that wasn't really right. It was translating somebody else's life experience and stuff like that. And when I watched Orange is the New Black, I remember just being like, oh, it can be this also. TV can be this also. And also the way that it played with the way that you would tell a story in terms of like flashbacks, or the entire episode would be dedicated to one particular character that seemed ancillary, but actually they are very rich in and of themselves. And in that way, every single character is a fully fleshed out three-dimensional character. And that is something that, yeah, that sticks with me.
I'll jump in. I mean, I may be dating myself with this one, but I think that the TV shows that truly reflected what my life was like and what I was going through in a very real and visceral way. So I'm talking like My So-Called Life, dating myself, as well as Freaks and Geeks. I was Sam Weir growing up. All of those things that take the quiet, intimate moments that you can personally identify with just hit you to the core. And I knew from that point, I wanted to tell those stories and go into people's homes and share those experiences with other people. No matter what genre you're going in, whether you're writing horror or sci-fi or drama or comedy, those stories ripped from your own personal experience will move someone else in ways that you don't know, that will last a lifetime for them as well. And that's what's inspired me to jump into it.
I would say for me, it was probably like musicals, like Cabaret. And sorry, did I jump on you, Kase? Like Cabaret and Grease, and like kind of larger than life stories like Xanadu, like things that felt like a fantasy, and like people breaking into song. And I think those are the things that probably inspired me the most growing up. But then I got into like, kind of like what Michael was saying, like these wonderful character-driven stories like Altman movies and Woody Allen and Hal Ashby. And I think for me, there's tons of TV that I love, but I think a recent example of something that encapsulates some of those things, it's like a show like Master of None. Like I love a good sort of strong lead, kind of comedy, kind of emotional, and then where his, heritage is part of the story, part of the fabric and the tapestry, but not sort of about, it's not the center of the story, but he's just a different type of American character, kind of living in the world. And those are probably the things that I respond to the most.
For me, it was again, Spike influenced me to go to film school. And the film school that I ended up going was a very small film school in New York called the City College of New York. And it turned out to be the greatest thing in the world because classes were kept very small. And some of my professors had actually gone to film school with Spike Lee. So they all had that mentality, like very aggressive personalities and very opinionated. They introduced me to a lot of films that meant something. They were very against Hollywood. They were very, very against Hollywood. And anyone who brought up wanting to write for Hollywood, they would shut you down real quick. So I sometimes mention these things to people and people look at me like I'm crazy, like what it is you're talking about. But like my film professors at City College introduced me to the French New Wave and filmmakers such as Francois Truffaut, neorealism and Roberto Rossellini. And it was just films that I saw myself reflected in them, because even though these films were shot in France or Italy or Japan, China in 1950s and 60s, they were about everyday people living everyday simple lives. And in these films, even though I'm not Chinese and I'm not Italian, I'm not French, but in these films, I saw the struggle of real human beings. I was able to relate to characters, whether I saw my mother on the screen or someone that reminded me of a friend that lived on my block. And I responded to these films in a way that I never responded to big Hollywood movies, even though I do enjoy Hollywood movies, but I responded to them in a way that Godzilla or Batman can never make me feel. Again, growing up in New York, television is something that is kind of like far from where you are, especially when growing up, honestly, this could come back to hurt me, but television wasn't the greatest thing in the world growing up. And then coming to LA for me was when this other thing opened up and I realized that, oh, look, there's this other thing called television and, it can be very profitable. And I never studied television formally. The way I've taught myself television is by just reading TV scripts and watching a lot of television shows. And granted, the past, I don't know, 7, 8, 9 years, television has changed for the better. And now we see television shows that I do respond to way more than anything that I ever responded to when I was a kid.
I mentioned Buffy earlier, and so I'll just drop that out again. I really love shows that the mythology is just really cared for, and people spending that time to develop that and showing their imagination. Like I'm watching Avatar for the second time in maybe a month and a half, start to finish. Again, I just have so much respect for how it's built out, and I think the characters are really complicated and interesting. So I love those kinds of shows. Big ensemble shows, like I mentioned Shameless earlier. I love that show. 6 Feet Under. On the film side, I love a lot of Nolan films. So much respect for the world building and how complicated the idea is. And I also just love writers who have really strong voices and that are really unique and that will kind of give you an unexpected perspective on the character, or the way they tell the story. So, Social Network is a film that I really love, just kind of the way that, we've all seen that film. I won't bore you with what it's about, but those kinds of films, Catch Me If You Can, that's another one that I love with Leo. I love 90s teen comedies. I could watch all of them in a row. Again, especially if you're talking about a film like Bring It On, for example, you're showing characters with, it's unexpected how well the Black girls are treated. Like the fact that they win in the end. I mean, that was revolutionary for me, seeing that, as a kid, or the fact that that film is about race, in a way that's not just kind of like knocking you over the head with it or exhausting you or making you feel like it's PSA. Like we're still able to kind of have fun with it. So I tend to be drawn to those kinds of projects. And, I just love pop culture. So, anything that that can speak to that, but be refreshing and interesting and unexpected, I'm there.
Awesome. Well, if anybody else wants to jump in, please do. Otherwise, I'll jump off of what you were saying.
Yeah, I just real quick. First of all, I love Kase. You're speaking my language because I grew up watching Godard, Truffaut, Fellini, all of those movies. And actually during this pandemic, I've been loving the Criterion Channel. It's been bringing me back home. But the two movies that I go back to again and again are All About Eve and Network. I remember watching All About Eve like very young and realizing someone wrote this. Like this was constructed, this dialogue, people don't talk this way. And I think that sort of, fueled sort of my interest in, how do you do this? How do you create these scenes and characters? And for me, Network, and the irony of Network is that it's all about how horrible television is, but it is one of the most perfect screenplays. So I tell young people, like, please, please, please watch it, read it. It's available on Amazon. But I never thought I would work in television. I up until probably my last year at film school, I was all about features, and it was really on a whim that I took a television writing class, and it was, the time when television was changing. And I think that not just in terms of structure, you're able to tell these long stories and really see the arcs of characters change and grow, and focus on characters who are not all that likable necessarily, and really see so much dimension. And from where I started, the challenge has been telling those stories about people who look more like me and that are, reflect my reality. And so it's been an interesting journey from 2002 to where we are now, and there's still a lot more to do. But I think, West Wing, 24, Sopranos changed sort of the paradigm for me of what you could do.
That's a really great answer. Yeah. Honestly, it's so incredible to hear everybody's journeys and how unconventional everyone's track to get to where you are has been. Kind of piggyback off what you were saying, David, actually, thinking about like stereotypical depictions and misconceptions in film and TV, like we've come a long way, and we've certainly got to a point where there is authenticity finally represented. But, have any of you guys encountered, any sort of pushback or resistance in any sort of writers' rooms or scripts you're writing on, and how did you navigate that?
Okay, wait, no, I answered first last time, so I'm gonna hold the space and mute myself.
I'll jump in on that one because something specific happened. And I was actually kind of proud as to how everybody came together and reacted to it. I was executive producing the first 2 seasons of Shadowhunters for Freeform. And during season 1, I was sort of in charge of spearheading the Malik relationship, Magnus and Alec. And it was an interracial, interspecies, bisexual, and newly out relationship. And I felt it really needed to be told with honesty and with care, and told, with authenticity, as 2 people get to know each other and ultimately lead up to a wedding proposal. Because it was new for the network and for the studio that was producing it, and in terms of trying to figure out, because you have so many different voices, be it the network, be it the studio, be it the writers' rooms, be it everybody adding their voices, certain people wanted the story to be less about that relationship and let's just gloss over it. Other people wanted it to be more action adventure. And what we all came to agreement as we listened to each other and sort of heard what everybody wanted for the story was that there's a way to tell the story authentically while also keeping the genre forward, while also keeping everything. There's ways in every single genre to tell these authentic stories. There were certain times that there was pushback, and in that moment, I had, fortunately, the authority to push back. But if you're just starting out, you have to find a way to express that pushback with the right tone and with the right acknowledgement of everybody around you, knowing what all the various needs are and why they're putting their stories forward. And it ended up turning out really, really well. I mean, I get letters today from moms in Kansas who watched that storyline with their kids, and because of that, their sons came out to them and their daughters came out to them. And that's why we do it. So I don't want to go on and on, but that's why we do it.
I think from my experience, what I've found is that people or these execs want to recycle our stories, and it's sort of like the same thing because they're afraid of changing the narrative to what we're used to seeing, whether it be like a Latinx story or trans story. It always has to be this harrowing journey. And what my goal is and what I try to push, my goal is to redefine gender, redefine culture. And I think that once we start telling our stories from a place of joy, where it's our identity informs our perspective, but isn't our story, I think that's when we'll make real change. And that's what my goal was in stepping into Little America. I was like, fuck, I'm in this room. I have a voice and I'm gonna push it as hard as I can. So I did. And there was some resistance. I pitched 7 different stories. And we finally landed on one because I was just relentless. And I think it's our responsibility to do that when we're in those rooms.
I really respond to what you said, Henry. Yeah, I've encountered that as well. You know, like telling joyful stories, telling stories about more than just our trauma. You know, is really important, and it is, you know, like that. Like that's going to be what really humanizes and normalizes. It's a full perspective, a full, you know, like a full look at someone's life, and that includes family and friendships, in addition to the challenges that they're up against. So, you know, I've definitely bumped into that too. You know, and specifically like around writing Black female characters. You know, I find that Black women are really kind of painted in a few different ways. You know, you sort of have, you'll have your magical Negro, you'll have your best friend, you'll have your, you know, like your angry Black one, you know what I mean? And I would find myself in these rooms and it's like, it's the same character, and the nuance that's there for other characters, you know, that aren't Black is very different, and it's stark, you know. So, but to your point, you know, it is a matter of being relentless. And, you know, I've definitely tried to take a similar approach, you know, and also just kind of not being afraid to just kind of ask people to sort of explain these instincts, you know, like if you keep kind of coming up against wanting to show a character a certain way, I'll just kind of like that, like, I'll make you explain that, you know, what's driving that? You know, something else that I bump up against in creative processes is this idea that, you know, queer women and their stories kind of have to be couched in their relationship with men a lot of the times, you know, and it's like, that shouldn't always be the case. Like if you hear a story that's about a relationship between two women, why is your goal to automatically try to romantically involve you know, I mean, like where's that drive come from? So I'll pick at it and I'll ask, and, you know, and I'll make people kind of, because sometimes people don't even know what they're doing. Like it's all very subconscious, you know, they're just trying to like kind of put themselves in the story. And I've found that to be fruitful sometimes, not all the times, but sometimes it is.
That was such a great answer, guys. Seriously. And actually thinking about this panel, we're a minority majority panel. Most people on here are non-white LGBTQIA people in this industry. Like, and in thinking about, you know, navigating stereotypes and misconceptions, you know, you really did start to touch on that, but has anyone else kind of grappled with that identity of being a part of more than just one marginalized or oppressed community?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I can jump in on that. Like, I mean, I think being Iranian and queer is difficult as a creative person because it's just, there are no examples of us anywhere. I mean, I guess there's been a couple in reality TV. We had Jackie Cox on RuPaul's Drag Race, who I was very proud of. But in general, I mean, one of the reasons I started writing novels, because I know, oh, you love RuPaul's Drag Race. I can tell, you're smiling. You know, for me, like, it was just really, really hard because going back to the pre-writers strike days, like back in those days, you know, execs and producers felt very comfortable telling me things like, you know, we like this pilot, but can you just make it a white family, or cut all the gay characters from this script before you turn it into the studio. In a weird way, those days were, I won't say they were easier, but at least they would say to your face. Recently, I've had people I've worked with, like, you know, you'll get a pass and you don't know why. And then your producer will be like, look, like, I mean, this just happened to me last year. They'll be like, look, like, they said the cultural elements could be alienating to the audience. Or I pitched a major network a show about an Iranian family, and they were like, oh, we love it, but we have a show about a Middle Eastern family in development. I'm like, are they similar? And it turned out they weren't. Theirs was about terrorists. Mine was not. But I think, like, it's just very hard, because I think when you're at the intersection of two identities, people they want to see you in one way in each of those identities. And most queer people on screen are not from the Middle East, and most people from the Middle East on screen are terrorists. So there's just not a lot of room. But I will say that's another reason why I think it's been so, for me, like, writing novels has been so liberating. Every one of my novels has a queer Iranian person either at its center or in a major supporting role. And that's like my biggest goal in terms of television, is to finally see more characters, you know, from my part of the world on screen, in exactly in that triumphant, hopeful, complicated, joyful way.
I'm going to quickly jump off of that, actually. I had the same experience at my last job when I was at Latin Week, and I pitched a project to a network. the same exact pass.
No.
It's too alienating for their Midwestern audience to feel accessible.
Oh,
Oh yeah.
I'm sorry. It
And
feels
the number of
horrible when
networks
you hear
always
it, right?
say, we've already got our Latinx show. We've already got our Hispanic show. And
But I just want to like, just to, when you hear that an exec says it's alienating the cultural element of alien, they're really telling you that like you are alienating, like your identity. It's just, oh.
Why do you think I decided to go back to the network?
Yeah.
We need more people like this trying to get authentic representation on the screen at the network level. Honestly, I loved working at a production company, but we need to start seeing change.
Yeah.
What's so incredibly moving, I don't mean to jump in, but what's so incredibly moving about this panel and hearing everybody, those that I've known before and those that I'm meeting tonight, when I'm staffing a show, you need to have every authentic voice on your staff and in your room who has a unique story to tell. And I have passed on projects where I said, that's not my story to tell. And then I've referred other writers I've known to the exec to say, reach out to this person. And I think it's everyone's responsibility to lift people up to be able to tell their stories. And just hearing everyone's stories, I'm like, I want you, and I know these voices that I now want, and it's just, there's nothing better than a writer's room where you have people bringing perspectives from everywhere, and then you can put those stories forward in an authentic place. So this is super exciting for me.
Just want to say, I identify as many things. I was born in New York. My parents came here from the Dominican Republic. We didn't keep records in the Dominican Republic as well as we kept them in this country in terms of like, going back years and years and years. So I can't really tell exactly what I am, but I do know that I'm Native American from the Dominican Republic. And I also know that I'm Black too, from the Dominican Republic. A lot of people in my family would never admit that. There's still this anti-Blackness in the Dominican Republic where some people who are clearly Black would say, I'm not Black, I'm Dominican. And you're looking at their skin and you're like going, all right, great, whatever, if that makes you feel better somehow. I claim everything that I am. And going back to what you said, Rod, that makes a huge difference, having people that look like us on the other side, because I've had meetings where when I go into a meeting and I can see myself in the person that I'm meeting with, and that doesn't mean that they have to be transgender too. They can be a cisgender woman, they can be a person of color, they can fall anywhere under the LGBT umbrella. There's always this point of connection where we're just talking about the script that they read. When I meet with people who are outside of anything that represent anything of the things that I represent, I find myself oftentimes explaining my story to them because somehow they never understand any of it and they question everything. Like, why is it beginning this way? Why would the mother do that? And it's like, because my mother did that and my aunts did that and the mothers in my neighborhood did that. Like, I don't have to explain that to people who understand my story, but somehow I don't even think that is that they don't understand. I think it's more like it's two things. One, they don't care to understand, or they pretend not to understand, so that way they can just say, say no or reject it or not get involved. It's crucial that we clearly have the talent that it takes to write and direct and shoot, edit, produce, act. We need talent. We need people like us on the other side greenlighting our movies and our concepts for television, because at the end of the day, any one of us writes something and wants to get it made, it has to go through the hands of, someone who's not like us. And so that's always an issue that we have to kind of like ask for permission or have their validation to tell our stories. And it should never be that way. The other thing is that I don't know about anybody else here, but I've encountered this quite a bit. It's like people look at me and I'm only considered for an opportunity when it's something that I reflect, where they're like, oh, we're looking for a Latinx writer, we're looking for a transgender woman writer, and let's call Kase. And it's like, I keep telling people, and I've said this and I sound like a broken record, guys, stop thinking of me as a transgender writer. I'm not a transgender writer. I'm a writer, period. I happen to be transgender. Clearly, I can write to that and I can bring that into a room, but like, yeah, I can write outside of that as well. And I want to see all of us here get hired because you're Black and we're looking for this person to write this white character. Well, why not? Like, they've written us forever and ever. Like, we can write anything. So like, stop thinking of us as a Black female writer or as a white gay writer. Like, we're writers, period. And that's when we see that, and we see people like us on the other side greenlighting projects, that's when real change is going to happen.
Yeah, if I can piggyback off of what Kase said right quick, that I feel like personally getting pigeonholed is a real tough, is a real issue in my career, where it's just like flavoring. Your job is to add flavoring, and that is not covert. That is an overt thing that has been said to me over and over and over again. It's like, oh, you're there to add flavor to the soup. Like, you're not a potato, you're not a carrot, you're not the meat, you're the flavoring. And don't alienate the potato, the carrot, and the meat, by the way. Your job is to don't alienate those people. So just pepper in your thing and don't be whatever. So you have to like choose what your thing is. You know what I mean? Because like everybody said, you don't want to be too much. And to give a success story, because I've been holding back because I can think of so many instances where I've had to either hold my tongue or meditate real hard and then have a huge conference call with casting director, studio network, and be like, this is why if it's my project and I'm an executive producer, I say, this is why we need to cast these people. This is why we need to see these people in casting. And then, producers come back at you like, well, I think that we still need to see these people. And I was like, I said I didn't want to see these people. I want, for my core, I want my people. My core is my flavor. Yeah. Anyway, so an example that is a success story is when I got to be on Vida, and then most people were queer, all people were Latinx. And this was the only time in I've been at it for 12 years. This is the first time in my entire career that I have not felt like I am too much, where I don't have to hold back about being queer because I'm afraid that somebody's going to treat me like a pet. And then, ooh, we got to have like they're going to go shopping, or what do the lesbians do? Or like, what do the bisexuals do? Or like, and it's like, oh, we're clearly humorless and real, like, bad for story. Never put a lesbian in a story. They're just going to tank it. And when Tanya, my boss, is just like, no, we're going to go hard at it. And there's going to have brujeria. And not only that, but, it's also going to have like all this sex and all this blah, blah, blah. But then also you're going to have like queers talking about queer issues that don't have to do with sex at all. And I wake up in the morning and the first thing I do is I thank God for helping Tanya create that show, because Tanya created that show, but also she's a little spiritual. So I have to give ups to the higher. But that I give thanks that show existed, and that I got to play a tiny role in it, because you are able to see what is possible and what is. And to be in that room is an experience that I will cherish for a lifetime, because you are looking at people around you that are so intelligent. I'm talking about like neuroscience major from Amherst intelligent and that's Ashley Soto, by the way. That's who I'm talking about right now. But people who are just like next level intelligent, next level imaginative, next level just like fighters that just got there no matter what, and they gay. And it was awesome to be in that room, and the type of stories that we created that did not it was all shorthand. And it didn't require the things that the people are talking about right now. Like, well, lead me through what's the joke about the dental dam? I don't get. And it's just like, it's not about you. You're going to have to Google it. So yeah, So success story.
Can I piggyback on that? I think that is such a great story. And what it speaks to is the importance of writers' rooms looking like this Zoom, right? I think that, when you become flavoring to a show, you become sort of that additive element, LGBTQ, Black, or both, if you're lucky, when you're only the staff writer, right? And they see you as, that little bit of diversity that is being subsidized by the network. And I think what we need to do moving forward, and I think this moment we're having these conversations, we need to support the rise of writers, not just get them into the room, but support them creating their own shows and putting rooms together. The only time I have ever been, not the minority in a television situation was when I worked for Ryan Murphy, and he makes it a priority. And so you need showrunners, creators, people who look like us, who are creating these shows, and people in positions of greenlighting authority. And when Kate was talking, I thought about that moment with Matt Damon a couple years ago on Project Greenlight when he schooled Effie Brown on diversity. Diversity, he said, it's what's in front of the camera, not what's behind it. And I think shifting that paradigm and reminding people, no, it's exactly what's behind the camera, because that's going to inform not just the window dressing of diversity, but the actual stories and the characters and the people that we see.
It's so true, honestly. So wait a minute. So has everybody basically been that token person in the room before? And not only that, but then how many of you have actually had to repeat the staff writer title just so you could get another job?
I've been a staff writer 3 times. And also an executive producer and writing features and a story editor. Like, in every other sense of this industry, I have proven beyond capable. But as far as TV staffing is concerned, because of, no, that's, so 3 times staffing.
It seems like it's an issue in this industry that definitely needs to get taken care of, and it will. Times are changing. It's just, let's try to change it a little bit quicker. Any execs or producers out there watching, please help me. But you know what? Let's actually dive into a topic that we've been talking about, but let's go in a little bit deeper, actually. Discrimination. Have any of you actually experienced it firsthand, whether it's in a room or in a meeting or anything like that, especially if you're around others who are not LGBTQIA themselves? Or, since our community is unfortunately very stigmatized and very divisive, there's a lot of racism in the LGBTQIA community that I think is really starting to come to light, and people are checking their privilege and really understanding the issues and biases that maybe were unconscious before. But what are all of your guys' experiences, especially professionally?
If nobody wants to chime in, I'll just really quickly say being queer is something that I kind of like don't wear on my sleeve necessarily, because people are so knee-jerk reaction to be. I literally, one time somebody was relieved because they're like, well, when I met you, I thought you were a lesbian. And it's that. It's like, okay, well, we could unpack that for a second, and then you have to, like, I'm very happy that I've been trained in comedy, because it's like, go parlay this into a joke and we're gonna move on. But I think specifically about gayness with it's being identified as attracted to women is a threat. And I'm actually, like, since I've been on Be That, I have been quietly digesting how often, either overtly or covertly, I have received the message that queerness on you looks like a threat, because I'm loud already. I'm like, I know what I want already. And I made an effort for years and years and years and years to try to soften my edges and tone myself down. And then on top of it, they think that I'm gay. It's like, you know, it's like aggressive on top of being Latinx, and like aggressive on top of aggressive on top of aggressive. And so, yeah, I'm not gonna even bring it home. Those are just my emotions. Digest them yourself. I'm sick of it.
I think Kase talked a little bit about this, but what I found in meetings and in rooms, there's a lot of educating that needs to happen, like whether it be about being non-binary or trans or Latinx or whatever it is. I'm okay doing that work. I understand that I may be a first in some of these rooms, and I'm willing to do the work so the kid behind me doesn't have to do it, but it's fucking exhausting. And it's like, that's what the meeting becomes about, rather than it becoming about the work that I did that got me into that room. So yeah, Little America was it was a very diverse room that I was really grateful for. So as far as like discrimination like that, I mean, it hasn't been direct, but there's definitely been a lot of educating that's need to happen in these like general meetings.
I mean, I would say the discrimination that I've felt has been a lot of like, what are you doing here? Like, wow, you're really smart and you went to all these really great schools, and like, I can't believe that I come from a very working class background, and you know, I grew up in a place where my parents didn't go to college, and because I read and because I was curious, people can't believe it. Like, wow, you're really smart, or you sound really articulate, or you know, all this language that's kind of couched in, wow, you're kind of a unicorn. And I'm like, no, I'm not even a unicorn at all. Like, this is, you know, there's so many of us out there who have to fight through that stigma of, you know, you're brown and you're queer, and how are you so sure of yourself, or how are you like, and you feel it sometimes. And I think that what's great about kind of what I'm hearing in this panel is that we're aggressive because we have to be aggressive, and this is the moment. We're in a moment to not be apologetic, to not sort of couch it, to not sort of, you know, and I think like Taylor was saying, like, we have the gift of, if you have the gift of comedy and wit, you can, you know, that's a knife to sharpen, and you can kind of, you know, cut to the quick and, you know, make someone laugh at the same time, maybe scold them on something. And it's been less overt, but it's been sort of like, you know, but it has been, you know, it has been that sort of like, maybe not who do you think you are, but I think sometimes it feels like that too.
All right. Well, we have a question from the audience, and I think this is actually going towards everything that we've been talking about. What do you guys feel is the reason why there's such a negative presentation to LGBTQ stories across the media?
I mean, that's a Ken Burns documentary, right? It is. It goes back.
Yeah.
It goes back.
And for anyone who hasn't seen Disclosure on Netflix, it touches a little bit on that, and that should be required viewing for everyone out there.
It's amazing. I just watched it this afternoon. It's incredible. And the ways that sort of what was allowed and how, you know, what's different now. The fact that we can have these conversations. Yeah, it was mind-blowing.
Yeah, I think that it's overt and covert reasons. I think it's a threat. It's just perceived as a threat to the stability of American society. You know, if you don't have cooperation within traditional family dynamics, then what do you have? You have chaos. And then how do we deal with chaos? And then with chaos, there is fear. And then you have entities and personalities that are more than willing to attack to fuel that fear and tell people where to direct it. Yeah, fear of the unknown.
I think that, Michael, go ahead.
I was just going to briefly say to the viewer that wrote in, I'd recommend you watch Visible on Apple TV if you have it. It's a 5-part documentary about the LGBTQIA experience as told through the power of television. the history of it in news, the new vanguard that's coming up, and it shows all the struggles that we have been going through in terms of how our stories could be told. It shows the people that pushed it forward all the way back to Stonewall, and it shows the people that are pushing it forward now. And what was so completely inspiring by that documentary, as well as this panel, as well as all the new writers that are coming up, is that our stories are becoming much more accepted, much more complex, and much more universal. And there are so many outlets to tell them. And so many people fought so hard to get us to a place where we are now. And we are going to keep continuing to fight for people to tell their stories in the future on whatever outlets are available in the future. That's all I was going to say.
Yeah, and what I was going to say is I agree with all of this, and I think it's so important to, in addition to all these, I would recommend The Celluloid Closet, which is an incredible documentary. But I had a pretty illuminating experience once. I live a block away from a movie theater, and I think it was like 2 years ago, maybe. It was showing, at the same time, it was showing, I think, 3 or 4 queer films that were very good. Like one was God's Own Country. I think one might have been Call Me By Your Name. One was Tom of Finland. Like, I was asking all my queer friends, like, have you seen these movies in the theater? And everyone's like, oh no, like I'm on Netflix or I'm doing this. And I'm like, well, if we don't all go see these movies, then nobody's gonna make more of these movies. And like, so I do sometimes feel a little bit like we have a lot of power to, you know, to support what's out there. And sometimes I also don't see enough of that. And like, you know, there's so many, I mean, in the book world, there's so many incredible books about queer, diverse experiences of all kinds of, you know, all across the spectrum of queer experience. It's like, make those books bestsellers and they'll become movies. And you know, and I'm also living on Criterion these days, and they just added for Pride, I think, like so many films. And I've rewatched like Cheryl Dunier's The Watermelon Woman, and they've added like 3 or 4 Gregor Rocky films like The Living End. And, you know, there's so many incredible stories. And sometimes I do feel like, as much as we have to point fingers at the lack of storytelling, we have to spend as much time propping up the storytellers who have been out there. Because I posted about Watermelon Woman, which is a perfect like classic of a film, and most people haven't heard of it because no one's talking about it anymore. But we should all be talking about Cheryl Dunier and Gregor Rocky and the people who broke, you know, the ground. So I think we need to spend time pointing the fingers, but also time propping up our own storytellers.
Can I just say, I love that you mentioned The Watermelon Woman. I saw it as an adult Black queer woman, and my mind was blown that I'd never seen it before. I was incredibly embarrassed by that. And then also how, like, in its representation, it's almost futuristic. I mean, the fact that she was making that film and thinking that way in the 90s, I mean, it's so incredible. So I'm parroting what you said, but yes, yes.
Quick shout out to LA Public Library that has a Canopy with a K. They didn't pay us to be here, by the way. It's just that I'm a fan of Canopy. So Canopy with a K, you can get it on Apple TV, you can get it on Roku, and they curate the playlist so good, so well. I don't know who curates these playlists, but I believe they have the entire Criterion collection on Canopy. Somebody tell me I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure that I'm not. But for Pride, specifically, they had so many, for this month specifically, they had so many curated categories that if you just scroll down, it's like you're getting an education in film school, the way that they curate stuff, because the intersectionalness, they do that. So LA Public Library, y'all, the reason why you're here on this channel. Hi.
All right, we have another question here. With everything that's going on in the world, what are you guys currently writing about? And, you know, are you incorporating what's happening with the protests, COVID, just the state of the world in general?
Can I answer that? Yeah, I mean, it's been a very interesting Pride Month for me. And you know, taking everything in that's happened over the last couple of weeks, not just as a, you know, as a gay man, as a Black man, as a gay Black man, you know, and as a writer and a creator who thinks, you know, writes about these issues and wants to tell these type of stories, I've actually found myself doing a lot of introspection and a lot of sort of just personal writing that I don't intend to necessarily disseminate. But I think you're going to see a real amazing flourishing come out of this period, because I think that, you know, watching that protest a couple weeks ago, that was a joint protest between you know, LGBTQ community and the Black Lives Matter activists, and you saw the sign that said "All Black Lives Matter." That's a moment. And I do think, you know, not to give Hollywood more credit than it should, but seeing people like us on television makes a difference. It really does humanize that experience. And so I think we do need to dig deep, you know, in this period and be even more courageous in sharing our stories, because I think that's how change happens. You know, it happens obviously, you know, grassroots pounding the pavement, but it also, you know, in a subtler way, working on hearts and minds is also, I think, what brings people to the table. So I definitely, you know, am thinking a lot about this moment, and I'm encouraged that, you know, we are embracing our intersectionality, and stories are a big part of it.
Yeah, it's funny. My husband's actually been calling this, unfortunately, our dark ages. And I just keep saying, please just let the Renaissance come already, because I can't take any more of this.
Yeah,
Actually, I'm looking at it differently. I think that this is a really fucking exciting time, and our voices are being heard, and there's conversations that are being had that haven't been had because we've been ignoring us, and we've been ignoring our voices in these rooms. So I'm really excited about what's going to come out of this, because now I feel like we have permission to speak up without fear of getting fired, without any fear of what that is, because we matter, and like our voices matter. And that's what this whole movement is doing right now. And I think, like, to talk about what happened, the last question, no one in this business is run by fear, and no one wants to be the first to say yes to something. And when you see like the success of Crazy Rich Asians or Moonlight, everybody's like, that's surpassed expectations. Like, whose expectations? There's an audience, and we need to see ourselves reflected, and like, there needs to be more yes from the people that are at the top.
Any financiers out there, you need to get in on Dante and Aristotle. Seriously.
Can I just say, Henry, I don't know if you know me, but I work with Val, and I'm a very old friend of hers as well. And I was at your reading of Aristotle and Dante.
Of course,
and,
I know you.
And it's one of my favorite novels. Like, it very much inspired me to write young adult novels. But that movie needs to get made like the minute movies can get made again. It's crazy. It's so moving.
Aren't you a financier?
Not anymore. I tried. Trust me, I tried. But that's the thing. It's like it's an undeniable project, and the book touched so many people. It's just like, we should, hopefully I think there is something changing in the world right now. That is the one good thing we can say about some of the, you know, trauma that's happening. But hopefully when we come out of it, we'll be in a world where stories like Aristotle and Dante will have an easier time being made, because people will know that it's time for those stories. It's time for those voices to be heard.
I'll put things into perspective. I wrote a screenplay in 2013 about a transgender woman, and I'm still in 2013, and I still don't have money to make that film. In those 7 years, I've seen plenty of films that have to do with a transgender woman. Somehow they find the support, they find the money, they get into the writing programs, they get into the directing labs, they get into the most amazing film festivals, they travel the world. These filmmakers' career are taking off based on this film, but they're not transgender. And I'm questioning, how is it that a person who isn't trans, how is it that they find the support to tell a story about a trans person? And I wrote a film in 2013 that by all accounts is the rawest film. Like, people just like rave about this script, but somehow it hasn't found no financial backing. And what the one thing that I really boggles my mind is that I've applied to so many writing programs with the screenplay, and there's a question that I find that is very legitimate to ask is, what is your personal connection to the material? Well, I lived it, like what? And sometimes on years where I've applied to a grant or I've applied to a writing program and I get rejected. Later on, you find out the projects they got in. And I've discovered that they're supporting a film with the trans story and a trans character in the lead, written and directed by a person who isn't trans. So my question to them is like, well, what's their personal connection to the material? So you're telling me that somehow, magically, of course, this person who isn't trans can connect more deeply and more personally to a story about a trans woman than I can, and I'm trans? Like, and the other thing is, like, whenever someone like me, whenever I submit my work to these places, I know for a fact there isn't a trans person sitting in that jury or in that committee, people that are making the decision. So like, I'm at the mercy of cisgender people all the time. If there were a transgender person there, one of the 5 people making the decisions as to what films get into this writing lab and what films we're going to support for the directing lab, if there was a transgender person in there, I am for certain that that person will vote for my film and would fight for my film to get in, not because I'm transgender, but because that screenplay really deserves support.
Well, we have another question here, taking this into a different direction. Are there any fun projects that we have to look forward to from you all? And I think touching on the fact that this is our renaissance, what is going to come out of this from you guys?
Y'all, I like go. I could tell you the people that you need to pay. I have a treatment for it is a like for Netflix or one of the main whatever the hells you call them now, cord cutting whatever's, or it is a gay Christmas movie. Why can't we have all the dumb tropes? You know, I want to have a meet cute where people get hit by a car. Let's do it. Yeah, so just give me money. Gay Christmas movie. That's it. I'm done.
I'm working on an animated series. It's about a Latinx fictional island, kind of in the vein of the Boondocks. So I'm developing that with an Afro Latinx woman comedian, which is really exciting. I'm working on a sci-fi project. It's just like taking our stories in different genres, because that's okay too. I mean, Latinx people could go to space, Black people could go to space too.
I'm really excited about Amari with Universal. I mean, it's, you know, it's sort of a Harry Potter style project with a Black girl, you know, at the center of it, which is incredible. I mean, all I think about is how when I was that age, I wish I could have seen that, you know, especially because I obsess over those kinds of stories. So I really look forward to knowing that, you know, my nieces are going to have that experience. You know, they're going to be able to see this character and have her on the screen in that way. I worked on a film called The Rocketeer with Disney last year, and it's a reboot of the original Rocketeer, but the new Rocketeer is a young Black woman, and she's a superhero, and I'm just like, give it to me, you know, like I'm really excited about that. Thank you. Yeah, like
so excited. Oh my gosh.
Wait, yeah, everybody unmuted just now. I'm sorry. Did you just say a reboot of The Rocketeer and that it's gonna be gay and Black? Did you just say that?
I didn't say gay. I didn't say we
Did
could.
you say you're gonna be the first Rocketeer in the 21st century?
yeah, she is of color. You know, it's a young Black woman, and I mean, we could talk about interpretations around what her sexuality is.
We will.
but yeah, it's like, I mean, it's really exciting. Like, these are the things that I wanted to see. So, you know, I'm grateful to be involved in those projects, and I my pilot. It's called Super Rich Kids, and it's about really, really rich Black kids growing up in Atlanta. And I'm really excited about that too, because I love my OCs and my Gossip Girls. And so to be able to sort of be able to wink to those formats, you know, from my perspective, you know, and from characters that I know and grew up with, you know, with the specificity to our experience is really exciting.
I think what Azia just said is so important, to be able to see representation of yourself and on TV means the world. You know, had I seen, you know, a gay young man on TV doing anything when I was growing up, it would have moved mountains for me. And now in today's stories, to be able to put that forward. So I'm doing a horror movie for Black Label Media, and they are actively pushing gay representation within the horror genre. I'm doing a broadcast pilot for CBS. They want full representation to be put forward in ways that you would never expect CBS to want to do in a medical procedural. To be able to see all these things through the panoply of what's out there, to know that it's not just the gay story, but it's a person who happens to be gay operating within the larger story is really inspiring. And I think Henry had said it really well, that this is an incredibly exciting time where our stories are actively wanting to be told and heard by the various people out there that can put them out there. So it's a really exciting time.
I'm excited about my I'm excited about a new feature that I wrote, because going back to that other film that I was sharing a little while ago that I wrote in 2013, and I found a producer, I have a producer, and things are moving in the right direction finally. And if there's one person who can find the money to make this film, that person is definitely it. But what I did in the meantime was I made a big mistake with my career, because early on I made films and I felt like, well, you know, I made films. Somebody should be giving me money to make films. I don't have to be digging into my own pockets to make films. And the fact of the matter is that no one is still giving me money to make films. And so I recently wrote a film called Trans Los Angeles, and it's a film that I can shoot with a budget that I can control, that I don't really have to ask a studio to finance my movie. I am asking for help, because at the end of the day, it's about help, but it's a movie that I can just pick up a camera and make a film my own self. And it's really the kind of person that I am. Like, people going back into my childhood would tell you that I'm not the kind of person to ask for permission. So for me to come to Hollywood and send my script to people and wait for them to make a decision is kind of like, I had to like have a wake up moment and slap myself in the face and be like, what are you doing? This is not who you are. COVID is kind of messing things up a little bit. But yeah, I'm going to be shooting my film pretty soon, and I have a lot of support. I have a support from Tribeca. I have support from Panavision. I have the support of a lot of people. So yeah, that's what I'm working on right now.
I'd like to just say that, you know, I know that what I want to do right now is talk about how impervious I am to the pandemic. And also, it has been very difficult for me to write literal scenes right now about people in groups having fun. It took a long time. I have PTSD. I had to work through some stuff with this pandemic. I think a lot of people who are listening and maybe who are on this panel have PTSD for a variety of reasons. There is, and this doesn't come as news to anybody, about the pressure and reward of being somebody who seems like they are an impervious warrior. And also to this conversation, I want to add that it has been tremendously difficult for me to reach my goals for this particular film that I'm writing. Just people having fun, people in a group, people telling jokes. Against the backdrop of what's happening currently, it absolutely has been a challenge.
Honestly, it has been very challenging. It has. I think the minute everybody found out that we were all going to be working from home, those of us who were fortunate to still be employed, it hasn't been easy, but at the same time, there are so many people out there who are suffering, who have family members who have been sick with this or who are unemployed. And now with the protests, finally, decades, centuries of oppression, it's finally all coming to a head. And with social media and technology these days, it's just an onslaught every second of every day. So honestly, you're not alone, Taylor. I'm sure there are others on here who feel the same way. We're all taking it day by day. And that's all we can do, honestly. So with that, I want to ask one last question for you all. If we were to be back here, let's say a year, 5 years from now, however long, what do you all think is going to be the state of LGBTQIA representation in film and TV? What are some of your half crazy predictions? Come on.
I mean, you see it here. It's all of us. And I think we're all doing the work that we need to do. So like, I'm very hopeful that a lot of the projects that we've talked about will be a reality really, really soon. So.
Yeah, Kase is my boss. So that's the future.
No, I wasn't gonna say that, but I was gonna say that I see us running things. We don't have to run the world, and that doesn't mean we have to run the world, but whatever segment is out there that belongs to us, we should be running that. However big or however small the segment is, it doesn't matter. We should be running a segment. We don't have to run everything. Other people think they have to run everything. That's where the problem comes in.
Well, if nobody else has any predictions, I just want to thank you guys so much for being here tonight. It's been beyond a pleasure. I want to end this actually with a little piece of advice that I received recently, and it's for everyone here as well as everybody watching at home. It actually really hit me very close to home, and it's something that I've thought about every day. And they basically told me to find that core group of people who prioritize authentic inclusion, because representation does matter. And it doesn't matter if it's a diverse actor in a guest role for one episode or that diverse staff writer today, because tomorrow, like you said, Kase, like they will be that series lead. They will be that series creator and showrunner. And I think as long as you have that support system and those like-minded people at every place in this industry, you can figure out how to be a smart disruptor. And if you are not in a place where you can easily put authentic inclusion in there, you can work together to figure out a way to Trojan horse that inclusion in until the reality we want to see becomes a reality. And we don't have to fight for this anymore. It just is. So I just want to thank you all so much for being here tonight. It's been amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
I'll pop back on to say thank you again from the library's perspective. This was a really wonderful panel. Those of you who may be tuned in late, it is going to be on YouTube and Facebook, so you can watch the recording, you can share it with people, and I hope you do. I can't wait to see all of the things these panelists are working on and have worked on. And I just want to, shout out to the library card again. Taylor was very right. You do have access to Canopy Films with your library card. And a number of the films that were mentioned here tonight are available on Canopy. For example, the Watermelon Woman is available on Canopy. So get your library card today. Get your library card today, lapl.org, and go ahead and head over to Canopy and watch some of these films, and go check out some books that have been mentioned tonight as well. And we will see you all next time. So thank you again for coming tonight, and thank you to all the panelists. Bye, everyone.
Bye.